Hi, I'm Matt Williams. Welcome to Glimpses. My guest today is a fiercely talented actress and playwright. She has appeared on Broadway, off-Broadway, television, and film. And most recently, you might recognize her as Tina in the hit FX series The Bear. The fabulous Liza Colon Zayas. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Matt Williams. Man, we go back.
We do. We do. Well, it's the New York thing. Everybody banging around New York, trying to make a living, doing theater, doing TV, and everybody's paths keep crossing, you know? So,
But I remember like the first time I met you. Do you remember that?
Was I sober?
Was I? I don't know.
No.
But yeah, man, I had auditioned for the for that show that my husband did. He did so many. It's all a blur. And you guys were so kind and you were so funny, and I thank you.
Are you talking of, St. George? Or
St. George.
St. George. Yeah. Oh, okay.
That was a long time. You were very sweet.
Oh, okay. So I didn't yell at you or throw books?
You didn't. You didn't. You were, you know, it's so, you know, New York is one kind of environment when you audition, and LA was just a whole other creature, and it was so nice to have somebody who felt like they were rooting for you in the room.
Well, I do that. I really do. When I write about this, that when actors walk in the room, you know, as they're taking their, I usually say a little prayer over them because I've been on the other side and I know how weird that can feel. And so I just kind of send them good energy and a little private prayer saying, let them do their best, let them relax, it's okay. And I think actors, being sensitive creatures, usually feel that when they walk in the room.
Yes, you have very powerful prayer hands.
Oh, okay. Well, I have to talk about The Bear because it's one of my favorite new shows and it's a hit and you're in it. And everyone talks about the energy of that show, the pace, and how the viewer feels pulled into that restaurant and a part of that. So tell me about that. How did you prepare for that? Did you have to take classes? Or did you culinary classes or what?
So the first time I got cast off a self-tape.
You did?
Yeah. And then and apparently I got...
And for the listeners who don't know what a self-tape is, would you explain what that is?
Yeah, you know, during COVID, you know, you couldn't go into a casting office, so everybody had to learn how to set up a camera and videotape your audition and send it in. And, you know, I mean, numbers just came out a couple days ago that 99% of the time people don't watch them. And I didn't put too much into it because I already kind of felt like that was happening, and they did watch it.
And they liked what they saw.
I got cast off of that tape, and it's been awesome ever since.
And you've just wrapped the second season?
We just wrapped the second season.
Okay.
Yeah, man. We just cleared the strike, thankfully. And so, yeah, it's going to be good.
I'm sure it's going to be good. Now, let me ask you something, because when a script comes along and you see the role of Tina, what's the first thing you do? As soon as you see this role and you go, oh, who is this? What is your process? Do you start analyzing? Do you just kind of give over to the character? Do you start channeling the character? How does it work for you?
It depends. You know, I'll look at who wrote it, I'll look at who's casting it, I'll look at who's, you know, and usually that information is on the front page of the appointment that you get in your emails. So I'll look at that and I'll see if there's a script, if there's time, if they've given me enough time to actually read the script, which they usually don't. And sometimes you don't even get the script.
You just get the
So you
sides.
just get the sides. And in this situation, I just got the sides. And based on, I saw it was took place in the kitchen. Oh, she's a hard ass. Can I say hard
You can
ass?
say anything you
Okay.
want.
And I couldn't make out if the person I was doing the scene with was male, female, or I just knew I had to do. I pulled out a pack of Goya powder. And I still to this day, because the character of Sydney, played by Ayo Itabiri, is I didn't know if that was I didn't know. I just knew I was giving her a hard ass time, and she's trying to ask me what this recipe is, and I'm like, I can't tell you. It's a secret. It's the system. It's the system, baby. And then she walks away frustrated, and I pull out a pack of Goya for the tape and a system. And that was it. And I was like, this is either ridiculous or maybe, I don't know. I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't put too much importance because I've learned over 3 decades of doing this, you got to let it go.
Yes.
And I let it go.
But
and then they came back.
But the thing is, you tried something. You took a chance. That could have not worked, but it did.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really didn't have much context. All I had was what was in the stage directions, or and that was it in a couple of pages.
Now, you didn't go to an acting conservatory. How did you learn? How did you?
Riffraff, right here. Riffraff, right here. I went to Albany State, and I went there to study business and accounting at that point, and then I ended up my dream was to be an actor since I was a child. I can't explain why. Maybe it has something to do with being the youngest and needing to grab more attention. But I always wanted that. I never really got we're from the South Bronx Projects. A lot was going on. There was no one to really kind of point me in the direction.
Right.
And so finally, when I went to school, my boyfriend at the time was like, you got to do something that'll help you make a living, because no one wants to see a short, chubby Latina. Thank you for that. And I have been doing everything to spite him ever since. And that's how I ended up changing my major to theater while I was there. Me and Stephen Adley Girgis, the Pulitzer Prize playwright, became buddies. We're in the same class. And somehow, with our journeys crossing over several decades, we've worked together, and it's gotten me some recognition. And,
Well, I would say incredible recognition, because let's talk about that. Between Riverside and Crazy, Stephen Adley Girgis. I didn't know you were in the same class in college.
Oh, yeah, we know each other.
I didn't know that. Well, you originated the role in the original production off Broadway in 2014, right? It was done again in 2015. Then you leap all these years to 2023, and you recreate the role on Broadway. How did that role change over all those years? Because you were there in that nascent stage when you were figuring out the play, and then you had this gestation period of 8, 10 years?
8 years.
Yeah, before you do it again. Did it change?
Not a single word has changed.
Okay.
The play
Did you change?
I changed, and I feel like I had more confidence in some choices, and hopefully it deepens. Hopefully we can find a way, or I found a way to delve deeper into this character's humanity and desperation of her circumstances, but and still balance the con woman, and I think it got better.
Yeah.
The trust with me and Stephen McKinley Henderson, who himself was nominated for Best Actor, Tony. I just love him, and the trust is deeper. Our shorthand is deeper.
But let's talk about that. So you did it off Broadway twice, and then on Broadway. And when you say the character deepened, do you mean you just find new dimensions to the character, or deeper emotions? You know, for a non-actor, what
Both.
does that mean? If
Both.
somebody's
Well, there's the thing about Stephen Girgis's plays are he is inspired by the people we ride the subway with.
right,
And they're not often the people who are gracing the covers of magazines. They're the disenfranchised, they're the forgotten, they're the invisible. And and he'll write them in a way that it's really easy for someone who isn't um, judging and dismissive to make them cartoonish, to make them unlikable, um, to just play whatever you think the joke is. And his writing is the opposite.
mm,
The more you play the truth and specificity, then it's funny.
right,
Then it reaches, then it becomes universal. And so, having had that relationship with him, I know that audiences are going to have every reason to not like my character.
hmm
And like all the characters I play in this.
You're a pretty tough cookie. You play a pretty.
But they're
Tina's
very
tough.
flawed,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
they have,
that's good.
they're flawed, and so I try not to judge characters.
hmm
But you got to give me something to work with, and he certainly does. And to find what forces a person to do ugly things.
The
And
why, the why
and
behind.
the
Yeah,
why behind, exactly. And so if we if we're vulnerable enough, and and I would just say, if you're vulnerable enough and you do the research and you try to personally put yourself in that person's shoes, then hopefully the world will have a better understanding and not instantly dismiss or not instantly expect to be entertained, and hopefully go to the bar after the show and argue about it.
right.
And that's the kind of theater I'm
Do
attracted
you
to.
carry your character with you, or can you shake it off afterwards? Does it take you a little while? Or...
Well, if you ask my husband, I did a 6-month run of Our Lady of 121st Street, and it was rough. Like, my character was a violent, hurt person, and I kind of took it on. And David was like, "You need to stop acting like Norca. You're getting too far with this."
Okay.
And so, yeah,
You scared
him. Yeah, a little bit, But that's the relationship.
Let me
I
ask you
scare
this,
him a
though,
little
because
bit.
you've worked in film, you've worked on television, you've worked on stage. What kind of adjustments do you have to make when you go from being on stage in front of a camera? You know, you've got close-ups. Obviously, you're not projecting to the back of the house, the obvious things. But what mental adjustments or physical adjustments do you make when you shift from the stage to the screen?
I started in theater, so I
Yeah.
feel like I understand it, and I'm in control of it.
Yes.
Like, the audience is right there. We're in a relationship. I'm in a relationship with this character, and I feel like that dynamic we have control over, and I can pivot accordingly because every night is different.
Sure.
And so, but with TV and film, I still feel like it's this mysterious, like, black hole that I don't really understand. But you're still depending on the same skills,
hmm
the same acting 101. It's about, doing your research and connecting with the person opposite you.
Right.
So physically, yeah, I just, as opposed to making more deliberate choices in the moment, even in theater, they
Right.
have to be in the moment. There's nothing worse than watching somebody who's, like, clearly manufacturing the same thing they've been doing. So if it's alive in you and you have an awareness, then it's exciting because you get from start to finish.
Sure.
As opposed to with TV or film, I gotta wait a year to see what I did because I don't know how it's gonna be edited and changed, and So I find that with TV and film, depending on how close up it is, these things I'm still learning,
Yes.
um, is you just got to think it. So you got to it's double the work to be so in there in your imagination, in your world, but still open enough to whoever you're acting opposite and hitting your marks. Because I tend to just roll with it. I'm like, ah! Oh, sorry. Um,
But
so,
you just said something about double the work and getting the
mm-hmm,
thought process, because
mm-hmm,
there's an old school, very famous film director, George Stevens.
mm-hmm.
The big movie was Giant, but he directed many. And he would tell his actors
Yeah,
to
but
speak softly, think loud. And I think that's really the difference, because
mm-hmm,
every thought that registers in those
mm-hmm,
eyes of yours, that camera's going to record.
mm-hmm,
And that camera's recording your thought energy, not just your
mm-hmm,
dialogue. Every thought that goes through your brain is
mm-hmm,
going to be on that
mm-hmm,
film.
mm-hmm.
And that is supreme concentration, because there's not a moment. The moment you pull out of the scene or you think about something else, you've broken that spell.
Absolutely. Because I have to think. We're having a conversation. I'm looking down. I'm looking around. I'm trying to get my thoughts together. Um, and on the screen, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I gotta do it while I'm looking at you.
Uh-huh.
Otherwise, like my eyes are like pew pew pew, like on screen, and everything's. But so it takes a different kind of muscle that I need to get comfortable with,
Right.
and just and trust that I've done the work,
Right.
and trust that I deserve to be in the room.
Yeah.
Because that's as as a woman of a certain age and a woman of color and
Right.
someone who's that message of having earned what you have
Right.
is not an easy one to put on and walk into the room with.
But you've more than made your 10,000 hours. You've put in your time. I think that's where people who don't know the business
Mm-hmm.
click on the bear and go, "Oh, well, look, that she popped up on a TV show. Wasn't that nice?" And you go, "You don't know how many workshops, rejections, auditions, plays you've done in the 3 decades you're talking about."
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of work to become an overnight success.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to talk about Sista Supreme. Tell us about that, because I didn't know about Sista Supreme until I started doing some research on you. And I went back and said, how did she break into this business? How did she get a foothold in this business 3 decades ago or whatever? Talk about Sista Supreme.
Okay. So Sister Supreme happened. I belong to a theater company, Labyrinth Theater Company, in New York City. And at that point, this was during the first year, we would just meet once a week and do readings and exercises and all kinds of bonding exercise. And, basically it was an actor's gym for primarily Latino actors. And then we diversified because that's New York City.
Right.
And so there was this one week where Paul Calderon, great theater actor and TV actor, Bosch, Q&A, goes back. He would run these meetings, and he gave us a writing exercise. It was like an embarrassing moment. And it was only meant to be one page. So I wrote about the time when I was 16, and I tried to bleach my hair, my eyebrows.
Okay.
Because I was trying to
Not
go
a good
for
idea.
it was terrible. But the worst part is not only was it terrible, I thought it looked good. And so I wrote that down, but then they were like, okay, so write more about that. But then as I started to excavate why and all the things, self-esteem, white supremacy, all of the things that were working on me, it eventually over time led to, from a one-page experiment to a 90-minute, 13 different character show. And it focused on the character, this child, Nana, and her mom, and her single mom of 5 children, and their visits and the aftermath of her dating and marrying a convict who was I didn't know this at the time, and I don't think mom did either. Um, had a reputation for having killed many people.
Ooh, okay.
And, there's that person who's in prison
Yep.
and very sweet and loving and sending a lot of romantic letters every day. And then the person who came out.
Yeah.
And so it follows that story, and still, how do you hold on to what you dream about and your worth?
Mm.
So it's really funny though.
I think you can make anything funny. I really
Thank you.
believe you can. Um, I have to point this out because it struck me. You're married to David Zayas.
Mhm.
You and your husband were both on Broadway the same season and both performing in Pulitzer Prize winning plays. I find that incredible. Now, what are the odds this young girl from the Bronx ends up in a Pulitzer Prize winning play on Broadway while her husband's in a Pulitzer Prize winning play on Broadway? That is pretty damn cool.
I think it's unheard of. Anybody out there, please, fact check. But two Bronx Puerto Ricans who didn't study conservatory, we're not singing and dancing in West Side Story.
Okay.
We're both in, straight plays, and each of those plays got nominated for Tonys.
Isn't that great?
I think is in the same season is pretty amazing.
It's
Very
beyond
proud.
amazing. It's beyond amazing. I also, in digging around, I found this New York Times article recently with you where it says Liza Colon Zayas swears by Brene Brown. And you talk about her book, Atlas of the Heart. I'm a Brene Brown fan. So, and you were talking about it's a constant in your life. Why?
I was listening to her today. In fact, it doesn't matter where I stop, where I start, whenever I need to just put it on, it's what I need. And today was about defining love and heartbreak.
Mm.
And I just find that she always grounds me when my anxiety and imposter syndrome is at a 10.
Mm-hmm.
She somehow manages to say something, and I can't quote you exactly what it is, but she always manages to help me bring it down a notch and be a little kinder to myself and other
I
people.
want to talk about that because what I pulled from the article is imposter syndrome. And it's interesting how many successful people, including myself for a number of years, that imposter syndrome is absolutely real. And you feel like, oh, the only reason I got here is because I fooled all these people. I'm not really talented. I'm not smart. I don't know what I'm doing. And of course, it's all BS. And how do you strip away that imposter syndrome? Because it's such a heavy cloak to wear. How do you get that cloak off your back?
I don't know. I will just say that constantly breathing.
Okay.
Just take a moment to breathe and allow ourselves the permission to check in and see, like, is the thing I'm freaking out about real?
Yeah.
And if not, what is it? For me, it's perfectionism.
Uh-huh.
I will avoid the real work and obsess over stupid things. Like yesterday, I was supposed to do this. Well, it's actually tomorrow, but I mixed up the days, and I was supposed to do this Wall Street Journal photo shoot of me cooking some, Puerto Rican dishes. And the silver lining is that I got ahead of it, and now I got most of the work out of the way. But I was freaking out all morning about how perfect my apartment looked. and there's dust over here, and this, and this, and I have to get camera ready, and I gotta get the thing going, and David's robe is still in the back, like the most insane. And then I'm waiting, and then it's like 30 minutes in, I'm like, oh my God, they're not here yet, and it was the wrong day. And I was like, meanwhile, but it was like, it gave me a moment to like exhale and look at what I accomplished, and look at the things that I was torturing myself and my poor husband over.
Yeah.
And so, again, that led me back to Brene Brown, to just, I've earned, I'm saying this to myself, not to the world. I've earned the right to have Wall Street Journal interview me. I don't have to hide the fear behind whether I have the right flowers on the table, or all of the other superficial things. And is what I'm freaking out about like superficial, or is it that I actually didn't do the work? Know the difference. Give yourself permission to just.
You kind of brush by this. Born in the Bronx, there's a certain pride that comes from, I was raised in the Bronx.
Yeah, man.
And a certain toughness that is just bred into you when you're from the Bronx. And you said you were the youngest of how many?
Of 5.
Of 5.
And then I had a younger brother and sister who have from my dad's second marriage.
Okay.
Passed.
Any of those folks on either side of the family in show business? Any actors?
No. What had happened was my mom and dad got married really young. My mom was 15. She was all gorgeous, and my dad was taking pictures of her in Times Square, and I don't know, a talent agent saw her and said, "We're casting a musical. Do you sing and dance?" And she was like, "Well, I'm self-taught," which she was. My mom, beautiful voice, and she could sing. And he wanted her to audition for West Side Story.
Oh my gosh.
And so, but she was underage. He had to go and ask my grandparents, and they said, no, because acting is for hookers.
Exactly.
So,
that old thing. Yes.
But somehow my mom has been my biggest cheerleader through all of this. And so, we ended up born and raised in the Bronx. I was, growing up in the Bronx when it was on fire all day, every day. And we live in the Bronx. We moved out. Anyway, went our separate lot, grew up, went to college, and now we're back in the part of the Bronx that I used to fantasize about.
Okay.
Which is Riverdale. But I will always have, I don't know, there's something about Bronx that's in your blood.
I think there's something, because when I talked to David, your husband, about him being a cop on the street and you growing up in the Bronx, there's something about a street sense or reading people. It's fine-tuned. And so I see you coming down the street. I'm going to read your body language. I'm going to check you out. I'm going to look at your shoes. I'm going to see and I think there's something that's inherently actorly in that. Because while we're talking, I got to be fully engaged with you. I have to lock eyes with you. I have to notice what you're doing with your hands. And you do that on an everyday basis in the Bronx when you're walking down those streets that are burning, right?
Yeah, there's, listen, it wasn't like I was 24/7, witnessing atrocities.
No, of course not.
But, I grew up in the projects. Back then, the projects were the best place to be. You called, Mrs. Annie or Mr. Brown, there was a pre-crack era.
Yes.
It was a different place. And so I had that experience. It was actually, anyway. And so, but I was tiny. I mean, I was like a toddler size in the 4th grade. So I would get picked on a lot. And my brothers were so sick of me coming home crying. They were like, "We're going to teach you how to box." So I learned at my size, if somebody came at me, the first thing you do is you punch them in the face and you learn how to trip them. You push them backward and you just go in. and that was it. Like, and we moved a lot. So you had to make a statement early on.
I'm not going to
And I'm
piss you
still
off during
doing
this
that.
interview.
That's the thing. I'm still I get triggered. But yeah, it's like I've had to travel for work a lot, and what I learned is like you know the map, you know the money, and you read people.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I can't walk the streets or like, no, I walk like, what the fuck?
You can say anything.
And I think that's what, that's been carried over into my character on The Bear, Tina. I've never worked on a line in a restaurant. I've worked in restaurants. I worked front of the house. I worked the counter. During college, I was on the dish line, miserable. But I walked into a pizza shop one day and I saw this little tiny Latina, I think South American, and all the men were afraid of her.
Mhm.
And when she came out, they were, she'd stomp in and out. And I was just watching her eating my pizza. And I'm like, I think that's Tina. I think that's her. And then I eventually, for the second season, they did send me for some culinary training, so I could fillet a branzino. But yeah, I know.
That's important. That's important. I remember I was on a terrible soap opera, and I was a terrible actor. But one of the actors was married to a nurse, and I happened to be in the room while they were watching an episode of the TV show. And she sat there and she said, real nurse, actor. And I said, how can you tell the difference? Because it was some show where there was surgery going on. She says, because the real nurses are matter of fact with scalpels and stitching, and the actors are making a big deal. So filleting a branzino, if you've taken a culinary class, I'm sure it's almost like muscle memory, and you have a certain method there that.
It's not that easy. Like my first day of culinary school with David Waltuck, who he founded Chanterelle, which is a big deal in the 2000s. Like my first time working with real knives, my hands were covered. If I show you the picture, my hands are covered in Band-Aids because I couldn't feel when I was cutting myself because the knives were so sharp.
Ooh.
And David was like, yeah, it'd be great. You didn't get blood in the potatoes. Killed a lot of potatoes. But the biggest compliments for me come from the people who actually work in kitchens. And this was, they're going based off of season 1 where I had no culinary training yet, but they recognized an energy.
Mm-hmm.
That they're like, oh, that's my mom and she had her restaurant, or I know this person, and they always refer to the authenticity and the vibe, and oh, you're my aunt, or you're this. And so that, I feel like.
Well, after the first season, Angelina, my wife, and I'd be in the kitchen. I go, chef, coming through, chef. She goes, shut up, shut up. You're not a chef. Shut up.
And I'm sure that there are a lot of chefs out there who are like really annoyed with that. But what are you gonna do?
Let me ask you this about when you're creating. Is there a spiritual aspect to what you do as an artist? And by that, I'm not talking about organized religion or dogma. I'm talking about, is there any part of this that starts to feel spiritual? The reason I bring it up is I think it was Eva Le Gallienne or Durst or Sarah Bernhardt, one of those big, magnificent actors of the stage, said their church was the theater. When they went in there, they felt like they were of service to something higher. Does that ever strike you?
Absolutely. I'm not a religious person, but I light my candles. I try to connect to whoever, if there's somebody out there listening, to the ancestors, for not just to perform.
Right.
But for anything. And like we have a tradition in lab before we go out, at 10 minutes, we get into a circle and we hold hands and we summon. Because the theater is your church.
Yes.
And so, yeah, we would have a little table with an altar.
Yeah.
with a copy of the script of the play we're doing,
Uh-huh.
and candles, and whatever mementos that are personal to this process, and we would circle around that as well.
I think there's something absolutely correct about that because it's thought energy, and the thought energy that went into that script, that is a tangible thing, the thought energy and the physical as well as spiritual energy of the people doing the show, and then the intermingling of all that energy becomes part of the ensemble. And I find myself sometimes in the theater, I'm responding on a level I don't understand because I go, I'm responding to something bigger than the story or the words. And I think that's what you're kind of hinting at there.
It's about having each other.
Yeah, yeah, connection.
We're here to be of service to the playwright, and there's no one more important than the person you're talking to.
Right.
So as long as that remains alive, then the audience is affected. You have no control of what they're supposed to walk away with.
Right.
And I don't want to do anything that's tied up in a bow and gives you resolution.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Let me ask you this. Youngster comes to New York, didn't grow up in the Bronx. They grew up in Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
And they're knocking around the streets and say, I want to break into this business. Liza, tell me what to do. How would you guide someone? What would you say to an aspire, whether it's a writer, dancer, actor, singer, composer? What advice would you give that young artist?
What kind of artist do you want to be?
There you go.
Prepare. I don't think you have to go into debt to be an effective artist, unless you want to teach.
Uh-huh.
Listen, technique, training, specifically if you want to do more classical work, absolutely, it's important to be as meticulous as possible. But you are you. I feel like too often who you are gets trained out of you.
Mm.
And that's the thing you have to fall in love with. Your quirks, what's weird about you. If that gets trained out of you, I'm sorry. The very thing that makes you valuable, that stands out in the room, that gives you confidence in any room, is compromised. And then you have to work 3 day jobs to try to pay back your loans. You're gonna spend all that money, get some tech training or something so that you're not waiting tables. And as soon as you graduate, you can start, you can pay your rent and everything else. Try to go to reputable, smaller classes. Learn the craft. You can prepare a lot more than we could have. You got the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Learn, prepare, read, watch all the great filmmakers. You can always prepare. There's so many classes online that aren't even it's not like you got to sign up. They're there for free. But trust who you are. Love who you are. If you're not a model, you're not a model. Forget that.
Right.
Hone who you are.
Yeah, that's good. Hone who you are.
And never compare your journey. So there are going to be people who are considered within the same type, and their journey, it may skyrocket right away, and then you feel like shit, and it's going to trigger all the worst parts of your... They may come crashing down. They may stay. Your journey is going to be completely different. Let that go.
Yeah, because if you want to be miserable, just compete and compare yourself to others, as opposed to own who you are. And that's what you're saying.
Own who you are, because success is not going to fix that.
Exactly. Yes.
We've unfortunately lost very successful people.
Yes.
That it didn't heal them. So.
Right. Okay. Well, this podcast is called Glimpses. My book is called Glimpses. And when I mention glimpses, it's finding little glimpses of God throughout the day, and however you define God. Moments of kindness, compassion, unexpected moments of grace. Do you find glimpses in your life?
Oh yeah, every day because of the imposter syndrome, and then
Ah,
somebody steps in and is and does something. I got DJ.
uh-huh,
My son DJ is the epitome of that.
uh-huh.
So, you know, DJ is our son. He's in the room. He's turning a little red right now, but he is the
He is a
kindest, most
sweetheart.
giving, just generous, curious, talented. And I'm like, wow, you can do this and not be miserable. Be a happy person.
Wait, I'm going to write that down. You can do this and not be miserable. I think every actor should have that tattooed on their butt or something. You can do this and not be miserable.
DJ. So
Well, I could talk to you for days, but I'm going to wrap it up and just say thank you, thank you, thank you. I am in awe of your talent, and you deserve all the success that is raining down upon you right now. It's well deserved. And
you.
thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Matt. And Angelina, your wife Angelina, is a godsend, and she's also in that same category as I put DJ. Just generous and open and joyful and talented. So thank her for me.
Well, that's it for this episode of Glimpses. As you go about your day, I encourage you all to take a moment and stop and look around and see if you can catch a glimpse. Thanks.